Contemporary craft fosters the use of traditional craft materials such as ceramic, fiber, glass, metal, and wood to make art. Our community honors the history and heritage of craft while showcasing modern exploratory work. On this season of Sounds from the Studio, host Sydney Leslie will be taking a look at contemporary craft's 50-year history through interviews with the directors, curators, and artists who helped us grow into the organization we are today. Welcome to Season 3 of Sounds from the Studio, Archive This. Find SCCPGH on Instagram and Facebook, and visit our website, contemporarycraft.org. Sounds from the Studio is available on all podcast platforms. We just ask that you please follow, rate, and review the podcast so more folks can find it.
Our exhibition, Gay, The Beauty of Ephemeral and Eternal, closes on Saturday, January 18th. If you haven't already experienced this exhibition, make plans to stop by before it closes. And if you have seen the exhibition, why not stop back for a second look? The Ikebana flower arrangements change weekly. As with all of our exhibitions, admission is free. Welcome to Sounds from the Studio. Today I'm excited to talk with Cathy Raphael, jeweler, writer, a founding mother of the Women and Girls Foundation of Southwest Pennsylvania, and daughter of Contemporary Craftfounder Betty Raphael. Welcome, Cathy.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Nice to be here.
I'm so glad for you to be here. When I was preparing for our interview today, I was looking through your website and I was thinking to myself, she has done so much more than I realized. So the things I just listed seemed a little basic. So I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Could you tell me a little about who you are and your background?
Sure. I'm Cathy Raphael. I grew up in Oakmont, PA, and ended up going to Syracuse University where I majored in metalsmithing. Mm-hmm. I graduated in 1970 when we were actually on strike due to the issues with Kent State and the war in Vietnam. After graduation, I moved to Philadelphia where I worked as a jeweler for a couple different metalsmiths and ventured off to Arizona to work on construction in the city of the future that Paulo Soleri is still going on, creating in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And then I moved back to Pittsburgh and started working at the store in Verona, the original Contemporary Craft. Mm-hmm. I worked there for about 12 years until my son was born, and by the time he was 6 months old, I couldn't take him into the metal studio safely. So I went my first transition where I started leading non-competitive play shops for grown-ups and did some acting as an improv actor and in a couple films, and started doing storytelling, which led to writing. And I published my first fantasy novel in 2022.
That's awesome. And I saw you also do short stories as well.
I do, yeah. And that's sort of my creative career. The rest of me is about women's rights and human rights and not criminal injustice. So I have a sideline in philanthropy.
Yeah, I'm excited to ask you about that. I was wondering, though, kind of starting from the beginning, what was your relation to art and craft growing up?
Both of my parents were in the arts, and that was their passion and their belief that the world would be changed by art. My mother started the first modern art gallery in Pittsburgh in the 1940s, and she and my father collected some wonderful work that we lived with, work by Joseph Cornell, David Smith, Paul Klee, etc. So the expectation was that all three of their daughters would go into the arts because that's what you should do.
Right.
And coincidence, we all did.
Yeah. I would say that's unlike the average American family, you know. I would say most parents are like, don't go into the arts.
Yeah, get a job that you can earn a living.
Right.
It was a very different kind of upbringing, and I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
So most people who've listened to the podcast know that the store started in 1971. When it first came into your life, what was that like? I
had visited the store from the beginning, and I knew some of the people that worked there. And I moved back to Pittsburgh in like 73, 74 and started working there as both as a metalsmith for the sociable workshop and a salesperson. So I was pretty involved in the early days.
Yeah. I never realized actually that the sociable workshop also did metals.
We had a metal studio. Most of the work that the sociable workshop did was in fibers because so many of the local people who were part of the sociable workshop were skilled in knitting and sewing. So that was and Beth Cameron, who was our original sociable workshop director, she was an amazing seamstress and created some wonderful items that people then were able to make in multiples.
Right. Well, what were some of the metals projects then that you worked on?
Mostly it was my own creative work that I could do in multiples and sell at the store. It wasn't I was probably there more as a salesperson and backup sociable workshop director than I was a metalsmith.
Yeah. What do you think were the most challenging aspects of working in craft at the time?
Oh, from the time I went to university, I think the hardest part was how crafts were undervalued in the art world as not being fine art. And that, I believe, has totally changed. But just being recognized as an art form as opposed to a crafty thing for people to do was the big, yeah.
Yeah. Were you already working in metals before you went to college to get your degree?
I had taken a lot of summer classes while I was in college, I taught up at Chautauqua. There's a couple summers in their metal department.
Yeah. From your own memory, what would you consider to be some of the key turning points, I guess, or moments in history of the early days of the store?
The store originally started as a summer project by a couple of college students and was, after they decided they couldn't make a living at it, the Riverview Community Action, which was part of the War on Poverty, took it over as a way to help local people earn some money. And also in the back room, there was a huge used clothing area. So I think the first transition was going from selling local craft work to selling national crafts and the sociable workshop for local craftspeople to earn a living. So that was the first big step. And then we started dividing the whole year into 6 different shows so that we had a whole transition of all the different things in the store, so we could use that as a way to publicize and make connection in the community, that it wasn't just and at the same time, the sociable workshop was doing gangbusters with selling some of their products in New York, which led to Marilyn Meltzer designing pillows for the sociable workshop and it getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But I would say one of the best things that happened was when the store was invited to do a summer exhibition at the Carnegie Museum. And that made us much more visible in not only in the Pittsburgh world, but also in the wider world.
Right. And kind of put you guys like in the fine arts realm as well.
Yeah, we're real. We are real.
Yeah. We're here to stay, actually. So I did want to talk a little more about your art career or metalsmithing career. You said you went to Syracuse. What inspired your work?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I was in high school and I took aptitude tests, I succeeded really well in like plumbing and mechanics. And
interesting.
trying to find, at that point, those were not career options open to women particularly.
Right.
But metalsmithing really appealed to me because it was about tools and making and soldering, and it was appropriate for my whole brain, and I loved it. When I was at Syracuse, I studied with a man named John Marshall, who was an amazing hollowware designer. He helped me understand how to turn a flat sheet of metal into a bowl and a thick sheet of metal into a cup. It was it was so physical, and
Yeah.
you ended up, you polished it at the end and it was shiny. It was like a very satisfying work.
Yeah.
I think as I transitioned into a real job, working for a couple of jewelers, then I was, everybody's engagement ring that they ever wanted. And in those days, there were a lot of zodiac signs and
Got it.
yeah, it was the 70s.
Yeah. Birthstones and.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So when I got to Verona and had my own studio in the store, it gave me a freedom to really explore my own path as a metalsmith, and it changed a lot what I was doing. I think at that point I started doing constructions with strange little things inside, and it was a lot of found objects, and I think I was heavily influenced by the artwork of Joseph Cornell, who has wonderful little secret things to look at in all of his work. So, yeah, and I worked as a metalsmith until, as I said, my son was born, and although I kept a studio at home for a while, it became clear that wasn't what I was able to do very often. So it became more of a hobby at that point, and I stepped into more performance work, and I wrote a book about how to create play shops for grown-ups, which is non-competitive play and storytelling and improv work. And then I was working, I was invited to join the Pittsburgh Playback Theater improv troupe. And then a couple of films that I worked on got me as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, so I can I can claim I'm a member of a union. Yeah.
What were the films that you worked on?
They were actually done by my sister, Margaret.
Oh, okay.
The Secret of the Twin Sister, and I can't remember the other name, but they were filmed in Elmira, New York, where she was living at the time, and had local kids as the performers. And I got to play, strange female characters. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is fun, especially with your sister.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, when I was looking at your website, you had worked on construction in Arizona, as you said, for the architect Paolo Soleri. Sorry, I might have gotten that wrong. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because I'd never heard of it before, but it sounds incredible.
It really is incredible. Paolo Soleri came from Italy to study with Frank Lloyd Wright, but he had an ego probably as big as Frank Lloyd Wright's, and he went off. But his concept was combining architecture and ecology to create what he called arcologies, where you would have an expanse of land that a city would normally take up, but you would build a main structure, which would have housing on the outside and businesses on the inside and industrial under the ground, so that you're preserving the land for nature. And because it was one structure, that the city was one structure, you had easy access to nature. And they started building this in the 70s with, people like me who knew nothing about construction work. I dug a lot of holes and poured a lot of concrete. And it's there today, and they're still building. It's a marvelous place and an experiment in how to do different kinds of construction work, cast silt building, and Paolo Soleri, they have places there for his ceramic and his metal bells production. It's a wonderful place. Arco Santi in Cortez Junction, Arizona.
Yeah, I was looking at images, and it looks like it's almost like built into a hillside or something. It was very beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with some of the people from those days, which is kind of fun.
That's wonderful. Was that before you kind of transitioned into writing?
Oh, yeah. I didn't really start writing until, maybe 15 years ago. I was asked to write a short story. They said, "Oh, you're a storyteller. You can write a short story." And I wrote for a Pittsburgh magazine called The Solstice Tale for their winter edition. And that was the first time I ever actually wrote anything that was published. And I started recognizing that I loved fantasy stories, and most of them were so misogynistic in their approach back in
Right.
those days. That's so different now, where there are many
Mm-hmm.
female protagonists, but it was like there was not one female I could identify with. And I just started thinking, well, what would that look like? And in
Right.
my world, it was a middle-aged woman who was going to save the world. So
Yeah,
that
hell
was
yeah.
really,
What was the writing process like for that?
mostly it was on the back burner for probably 15 years. But 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Hedgebrook, which is a women's writing retreat outside Seattle on Whidbey Island. And I met a number of women who were writers and wannabe writers, and we ended up creating a writing group that's been, well, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year.
Oh,
And it was,
nice.
yeah, because with their support and encouragement that I actually finished my novel and have done some other writing, and I needed that kind of support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, writing an entire book seems like the undertaking of a lifetime, honestly.
And there are people that crank them out, one or two a year.
I
have
know,
no
it's crazy.
It is crazy.
I'm like, how is Stephen King doing that, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing.
I know also at a certain point, you became a founding mother of the Women and Girls Foundation of Southwest Pennsylvania. How did that come into play?
I was invited to a lunch where they were talking about how only 5% of all the philanthropic dollars were spent on women. And when they called, youth organizations, they were really mostly men. And so there were a bunch of women at this lunch that said, well, we need to start our own foundation.
Yeah.
And it was a process, but we did create it. And Heather Arnay was our first executive director, and it was a lot of effort, and they're still going strong. Through that process, I served on the board there as well as being one of the founding mothers. But it led me to working with other organizations. I served on the board of the Miss Foundation for Women in New York, and the Women Donors Network in California, and the Funding Exchange, which is another progressive organization. It opened up a whole new world for me, starting as a women's rights activist to understanding that things are more dire and more needs to be done.
Right.
And I actually think I've been a longtime supporter of contemporary craft, and I think that the importance of art in creating a sustainable and empathetic and humane world is crucial. We
Absolutely.
So many schools eliminate art and music just because of finances, and I think that is a severe deficit in our education system. So I think.
And even more so impending now.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah.
A little work for the whole education department at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what is one piece of advice you would give to young creatives as someone who's kind of been in a creative environment your entire life?
That's a tough one. What I learned over time is that I evolved as a metalsmith from kind of following in the path of my mentor, John Marshall, to finding my own voice as a metalsmith. So I think my one piece of advice would be to connect with others, but find yourself and be fearless in the process.
We ask all of our guests this. What are 3 songs that you feel represent you and your work?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is I Am Woman by Helen Reddy.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a theme. The second one I think of is Trouble in Mind by Nina Simone.
Ooh, okay.
Because she has such a beautiful voice, but it is also about hope.
Right.
yeah, the sun's going to shine in my back door someday just brings me hope. And the third song that I would say is an old Girl Scout song called Each Campfire Lights Anew, which is a song about friendship and connection. And,
I know it, I think.
well, when I look at my life, I'm 77 now. When I look back over my life, I have friends that go back to fourth grade and have been with me all this time, and I would never have gotten to where I am if it weren't for the people and the connections I have. And I am so very grateful. So that's my third song.
That's a great pick and reason for the pick, I would say. It's so funny. I'm thinking, because when we post the podcast episodes, we also post the songs to a playlist. And I'm just hoping that the Girl Scout song is on Spotify.
I don't know. I actually recorded it somewhere. If you need it,
maybe we can get your recording. Yeah.
I recorded this. You don't have to put this in the podcast. I recorded it to be played at my funeral.
Yeah, that's a little dark, but I still love it, you know?
Thank you. I figured I might get my last word in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you might as well just be prepared, you know? That's also so wholesome for a funeral. Well, I want to give you the chance to kind of tell everyone where you can be found online, or if you have any projects or news coming up that you'd like to promote.
Well, I can be found online at CathyRaphael.com. I'm working on another book or two, but at the rate I'm going, it may be a while before they're ever published.
Right. You'll get there.
Thank you for the confidence, Sydney.
Do you want to give a teaser about what the book is about, or would you rather keep it a secret for now?
I think at this point, I'll keep it a secret.
Okay.
My book that's published, Journey to the Heartstone, is a feminist fantasy. So where patriarchy has to come back to fruition because things have gotten out of hand. So that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Ooh, I'll have to pick up a copy. I'm interested.
Also available on audiobook and ebook.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today, Cathy. It was great talking to you.
Lovely talking with you, Sydney. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. On the next episode of Sounds from the Studio, we'll be talking with Pittsburgh-based artist Jerome D'Angelo. Jerome's quilt is in our permanent collection and served as the basis for a project in the Sociable Workshop in the 1970s. Thank you for listening.
Sounds from the Studio is produced by Rugged Angel Productions for Contemporary Craft. Please subscribe to and rate the show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to share. Thanks for listening.